Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela De La Mora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are. Hey, y'all. Okay, so I have to open up with this funny story before I dive into this week's episode. I am recording this episode in the voice memos app of my iPhone. And the reason for this is because I am currently in Quepos, Costa Rica with my daughter, and there's no Wi-Fi. And this has happened multiple times on this trip because we've kind of gone to slightly less populated areas. That being said, we are improvising and this is just entrepreneurial problem solving, y'all. We will figure it out no matter what. But starting from last year, we travel in the summer because it's the only time that she and I can really take trips because she's in public school. And in public school, you can't miss more than a couple of days before you're truant. The little traveler in me is like, ugh, okay, we have to do a summer trip every year. And I like to make it long enough that my brain has time to fight me on being offline, even though I'm recording a podcast right now. Just so, I want to make memories with her and I want to be with her and all the things. And the reason that I didn't record this before I left was because I was making decisions still about this six-figure self-trust series and the workshop that's on July 17th. So if you want more information, if you go to my website, marieladelamora.com. Oh my God, I just said that in Spanish because I'm in Latin America. marieladelamora.com. You will learn more about it because there is a workshop on July 17th that today's episode is going to perfectly feed into and perfectly set you up for. So because of that, I was still in the process of making some decisions. And because those decisions weren't made, I was like, hey, I'm just going to record this episode while I'm gone. No big deal. And then it's so funny that I sit down to record it and our Wi-Fi goes out for the upteenth time. So it's fine. This is literally what I manifested. I even said, oh, I hope that during this trip, my Wi-Fi is bad because that's just going to force me to be present. And then it happens. So be careful what you ask for. And so that being said, in today's episode, I am going to be talking about the 3 common ways that self-doubt affects your demand and 3 steps to take. So to set this up, if you haven't caught the previous 2 episodes that are in the six-figure self-trust series, so it's basically last week's episode and the one before that, I've been talking about why self-trust is the majority behind creating your first 100K to even 250K. That was definitely the case for me. And what I mean by that is, yes, you need actions and strategies. However, it's more like 80-20. I think it's 80% how you make decisions and just trust yourself to figure out what's the strategy you're going to use. What are you going to try? When do you need to try again? When do you need to pivot? All those things. It's really just you and your own access to yourself, which is a leadership skill, right? It's really just, it's self-trust, it's mindset, it's leadership. 80% of that is getting to 100K to 250K. And it's 20% whatever you happen to be learning, right? And so that's really what this is about. And what builds self-trust isn't just affirmations and all the things. As much as I love that, I honestly, I don't love it. Honestly, I'm such a logical person. I have to say this. I'm such a logical person because I'm a marketer. So for anything I do, I'm like, why am I doing this? Why does this make sense? Even with my clients, when I'm coaching them, I'm like, listen, I'm going to give you mindset coaching, but then I'm going to give you a marketing answer why this actually makes sense strategically, what I'm asking you to do. Or that thing that you're doing, I'm going to tell you why it's brilliant, not just because I'm patting you on the back, but I'm going to tell you why this is brilliant from a marketing perspective. Why does this make sense based on marketing psychology? And I have to be, right? Because as a marketer, I helped so many different types of businesses make money or take struggling products and turn them around and make money. So I brought that with me into entrepreneurship where I'm like, listen, we need to be making decisions based on evidence and data, and that is what builds self-trust for me. If you caught last week's episode, I talk about how even my mindset system that I use, belief bookmarking, is based on evidence. It isn't just telling myself nice things. I'm like, that's cute, but I need to look at evidence to be like, look, Mariana, this is what you've done. This is why it makes sense. Look at this, like bottling it up. To me, that is what builds self-trust. Why? Because you're not outsourcing it. You're literally creating a system for everything you do, whether it's mindset or marketing or thought leadership or whatever, which is the three things we're going to talk about today: mindset, marketing, and thought leadership. Systems that are created and decisions that you're making based on your own evidence. That's self-trust, because you're like, who's going to tell me? Who's going to tell me something? Because this is literally the truth. This is my own evidence. So that's what builds self-trust, is creating strategies and making decisions based on your own evidence. This is the common thread behind all of the doubling results in reclamation, or hitting the results in half the time in reclamation. It was also the common thread behind what I shared in my last episode, wherein I talk about how in 2021, that was a very big self-trust year, like where I lost it completely and I just felt really shitty about myself and I lost my belief in myself and I made it mean something. I literally was making less money. This happens a lot where you're making a certain amount of money and then your results start to drop and you feel really bad and it's hard to get out of it. And in 2021, I turned that around based on the three things I'm going to talk to you about today. And I made more money in the last 2 months of that year than I did in the first 10. I made 80K in the last 2 months, whereas I had made 70K in the first 10. And that's without changing anything about my offers. No launching, because that doesn't count. When you launch, yes, of course you make more money in certain months of the year. Literally changed nothing about my offers, and I only was selling one-on-one coaching. And I made more money in the last 2 months, 80K in the last 2 months. So as I talk to you about this, and I'm going to talk to you more about the 3 areas where I see self-doubt unraveling demand, when I see how my clients have been able to double their results in half the time, triple their results, hit their goals in half the time, it doesn't come as a total shock to me, because that was my job in corporate, like to look at things, to gather the decisions and the data, and then make recommendations based on that, and then turn around and relaunch things and have them make triple the revenue. That was literally my job. And I would go in and I'd ask all the questions and create the data and create the evidence and go, okay, based on this, I can see what we need to stop doing. I can see where we need to double down. The difference with entrepreneurship is that there's this big mindset element as well. So that's why I say in this episode, we're going to talk about the marketing element, the mindset element, and the thought leadership element. Full transparency too, for this episode, when I talk about the doubling and the tripling of revenue or hitting the same results in half the time, it's a lot more likely and easier when you have a service that you've sold and delivered more than a handful of times. And the reason is that the more you've sold and delivered something, the more data you have, right? But even if you're earlier in your business, it's still going to help you, because you won't have to have as big of a gap to catch up on later on down the line, if that makes any sense. So in this episode, I'm going to share the 3 most common problems that I see that are solved through self-trust based and 3 strategies, right? So 3 problems, the 3 most common problems that I see that affect demand that are essentially fueled by lack of self-trust, and 3 strategies, small strategies for each one. Like I said, 1 is marketing related, 1 is mindset related, and 1 is thought leadership related. So these 3 strategies are going to help you. Number 1, to double down your marketing on what is working. Number 2, to quickly fill in the gaps in your belief and in your identity. So essentially, sometimes I say you're sitting in like an identity canyon, where the reality is you're here on one side of the canyon, but you see yourself on the other side of the canyon, and you start to either self-sabotage or you're just like experiencing imposter syndrome. So I have a system for that. Number 3, it is going to help you make your messaging more potent by doubling down on your thought leadership. I'm also going to share the 3 most, like I said, the 3 most common places where self-doubt unravels and affects demand, why each of them happen, what it looks like when you're there, and 1 small strategy to use for each. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to share more about a workshop that I am hosting on Wednesday, July 17th. It is called 3 Ways to Double Your Demand Using Self-Trust as a Strategy. And in that workshop, we are going to build out each of these 3 strategies more in depth, because I'm going to share 1 little nugget for each one, but there we're going to talk more in depth about it. And then you will get a chance to apply for Reclamation Mastermind, because I'm opening applications again for just 5 days. And I'm even offering an extended payment plan this time as well, just to make it easier for you to enroll. and get the support you need this year to make that a very easier yes for you. And you would be joining this incredible community that is just so amazing. This current cohort started in February. And if you look at my sales page and you look at just like the posts from Reclamation from earlier this year, you're going to just see how many badass, incredible leaders. It is just the most amazing community, and you would be joining them this round. So with that being said, let's dive in. So the main issue that I see in entrepreneurs in general, but I'd say I work with a lot of first gen and women of color, right? Is thinking that implementing someone else's strategy will be your solution too, which keeps you in a cycle of outsourcing your self-trust and not building the like discernment and decision-making skills that any entrepreneur needs. And there are countless reasons why this happens. But when it comes to women of color in particular, I'd say anyone who is conditioned as a woman, however, women of color, first gen in particular, even more, we are literally taught how to be obedient, how to be like good students, how to listen, how to not stand out too much. Someone else is telling you what is right and wrong. And we're valued, we are praised for being correct, for being precise, all those things. Unless you were conditioned to know who you were, to experiment, to fail, to try, to all the things, you're gonna you'll probably do very well in school and the workforce, because the school and the workforce don't require self-trust to the same degree that business does. And that's because it is a lot more structured. And there's like steps to everything. And obviously business has steps, but there's a lot more individual decision making, and it feels way more vulnerable. It is so much more vulnerable. It affects your money safety. Countless reasons why entrepreneurship activates things that school, college, the workforce doesn't activate, right? But the reality behind outsourcing your self-trust or following somebody's framework and things like that, which can absolutely help, but any effective strategy in business has to be based on evidence and data from your own business and your own past experiences. And when I say strategy, I even mean the way that you mindset coach yourself, the way that you build your belief, the way that you build your identity. It can't just be you telling yourself things and just like self-coaching. Sometimes self-coaching is great, but I really am an advocate for like, how do we bottle up evidence? How do we make decisions to show ourselves constantly? Oh no, this is why we're doing it. No, Mariela, this is why you're doing it. So anytime you want to be like, oh, but this person is doing this, or I was doing this, but now I heard this, and now I'm second guessing why I'm marketing this way, or I'm second guessing what I'm saying here because I don't see anybody else doing it. You can go back to your evidence. And that's what builds self-trust, right? Being in this place, being able to create strategies that are based in evidence, not only builds self-trust, but it changes how you show up to coaching. It changes the coaching you ask for. It changes the strategies that you decide on, because you won't be just doing what everybody else is doing on purpose. You're going to know why you're doing what you're doing. You're going to know how to troubleshoot because you're going to know why. So what happens when we're just following someone's strategy is that you're like, oh, it isn't working. And then you go to your coach and you're like, well, it isn't working, because you don't even know why you're doing what you're doing. Right. So I've seen it. I have coached so many women one-on-one. So I've gone depth into this, but it also, like I said, has been the common thread, not just in my own leaps forward where I'm doubling, tripling, magnifying, or collapsing timelines, but also my clients. And in Reclamation, that was the common thread. Like I said, let's go into each of the three areas. So these are the three main areas that I see this happen most frequently. And these things are also going to prepare you for the workshop on July 17th, where we're going to dive in deeper. So problem number one that I see that has to do with self-trust is you overthink your marketing, or you stop doing what was working because you're trying to follow someone else's framework. The way that this shows up is, again, you're overthinking your marketing. You think it needs to look a certain way. You abandon your own thoughts and you're just like, oh, but I have to follow this process. And then all of a sudden, you just writing an email or something starts to feel really hard. Or you have an idea and it feels very inspired and then you don't do it because it doesn't fit the framework. You're like, no, but I can't just say it this way. I have to do it this way. So in that essence, what happens, what I see and what I've done myself without intending to, is you start to use other people's marketing and sales frameworks against yourself, because you start to outsource it. It's like you forget what you were doing that worked you forget to check in with yourself. So you start to sit in the mindset of, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Like, where should I be doubling down? You're just sitting in a lot of self-doubt. Is what I'm saying making sense? Like that sort of thing. And marketing, the reason overthinking happens in marketing and self-doubt happens in marketing, and it requires self-trust, is because unless you know why you're doing what you're doing, you will feel unsure in your marketing. Unless you are making decisions in your marketing that's based on evidence and information from your own business or your own brain, you're going to feel unsure in your marketing. You're going to go in and be like, oh, I'm doing this strategy, and you're just not behind it. And when you're not behind it, that either stops you from showing up, or that unsure energy is going to show up in, your webinar or whatever it is that you happen to be doing, right? And the truth is, there are so many ways to market. I cannot state this enough, right? Literally, as a marketer, I'm like, I always laugh whenever people are like, oh, it's like this. There's tactics and then there's actual like strategy, right? So you need to create your own strategies based on evidence, and it doesn't need to be hard. You don't need to go get a freaking like doctorate in marketing, right? It doesn't even need to be that deep. I'm going to make it so simple in this episode, right? And here's the thing. One thing we don't realize about marketing is that people often, what is packaged and sold is tactics, not strategies, because tactics are often easier to sell. So the difference with doing a tactic would be if someone is like selling a DM, they call it a DM strategy, or a webinar. It's like webinar, like that's a tactic. Now, it can work for you, but I think that's, if everyone is doing the same tactic, it makes it harder for you to think about, okay, how do I connect with my people? How do I want to launch this? How do I want to serve my people? How do I want to talk about this? And knowing why you're doing it versus doing the tactic, but not being fully behind it. So tactics are different from strategies. What happens when you trust your marketing and you know why you're doing what you're doing is it allows you to experiment and implement faster. It allows you to be fully behind why you're doing what you're doing. It allows your marketing to be fun because you're doing something that you're like, oh, I actually feel like this is going to be really good for my people. I'm really excited to try this. And then that keeps you in a creative, and it helps you troubleshoot, because when you know why you're doing what you're doing, you can troubleshoot versus being like, oh, this thing didn't work. So I'll give you an example of where I'm doing that now. So I opened up Telegram recently because I was like, oh, I think it would be really fun. Like, I'm such a person that like just likes to pick up my phone and talk. So I was like, how can I serve more people by just picking up my phone and talking? This is one of my gifts. I just show up and coach, show up and talk. So how can I do that? So I was like, I never would have come up with that idea if I was just like trying to implement somebody's strategy. So it's like you start to, and then I started to look into Telegram and I was like, oh, cool. You could do like invitations that have an expiry date. You can do giveaways in there. You can do all these different things. And it made me excited to try it. But that had to come from my own brain in thinking about, oh, what has created my success in the past? What comes easily to me? How can I serve on a bigger level? That just makes it fun. So that's what happens when you trust your marketing. So one strategy that you can implement to help you to trust your marketing and the way that you gather. This is going to be the same strategy for all of them, but I will tell you what it looks like. So the strategy is to gather evidence. For marketing, for trusting your marketing, what this looks like is being aware of two things. Number one is, what data do you have to show how people have found out about you? Like, how are people discovering you? And then what data do you have to show what made them reach out to you in the first place, right? So there's two parts here. There's awareness and then there's nurture, right? And that's all that marketing is, just people being aware that you exist. And number two, building a relationship with them, which is nurture. So if it's just awareness, people finding out you exist, and nurture, like how you give them information, how you build trust, how you give them the information that they need for a buying decision, what is your awareness strength? And what is your nurture strength? Because if you know what is working for you in awareness, where people are discovering you, and you know what's working for you in nurture, which is what's making them want to work with you, you can double down on them and get rid of other things. So I'm going to talk more in depth in the workshop about that. But if just at a high level, if you aren't already asking this question in your intake forms, in your discovery process, somewhere along the line, you want to find out, how are people finding out about you initially? In a larger organization, this would be lead sources. So where are new leads finding out about you? Is it through they discover you through LinkedIn? Did they discover you through other people's podcasts? Like different things like that. And you can decide how you want to categorize it. But for example, I have been tracking this from the beginning of my business. And I have an entire category for third party, which is essentially platforms that I don't own, that are other people's platforms. This is third party credibility. This is something that I teach in Reclamation. So third party credibility, again, is platforms I don't own. So speaking engagements, podcasts, things like that. I have the data to know that 1/3 of my clients, not just audience, because we're counting people who work with you, to know that 1/3 of the people who work with me found out about me through third-party credibility. So that lets me know in my strategies, if I were to double down on something, that would be one to double down on, right? So that's awareness. So if client lead sources, which is essentially awareness, how are people finding out about you? Okay, if I were to pick 2 things to double down on, I think that's all you really need. 2 ways that people are discovering you. So again, if you're not asking that question, maybe you can go back and just do a little sample size, look back at your last, if you've served 10 clients, look back at the last 10 clients, and maybe off memory, you can figure out okay, was it just that they discovered me through social media? That could be the case, but it could also be, oh, somebody told me about you, right? So go back to your intake forms, because that could be a category. It could be referral, right? Referral could be a category. You definitely should have that. Because if you have folks saying half the people somebody told them about you, you need to know that a big source of client leads is referrals. You need to know what's happening for you in awareness, right? So that's how you find out about it, is how do people find out about you initially? Then number 2, it's nurture. What makes someone want to work with you? That you literally can find out by looking at your intake forms. You should have this question if you don't have it already. It is, what made you want to work with me or us specifically? And that should be not just what makes you interested in hiring a coach. Don't ask that question. That's general. What makes you want to work with me specifically? Or what makes you want to work with my agency specifically? And they will give you information. So even if you were to look back at your last 10 clients and see what was the answer to that and categorize that, and that's going to give you pick up the top 2 things there. That is a strength, because that's going to tell you, okay, they've been following you for a while, but what made them actually want to work with you is those answers. So you want those 2 answers, right? So that's your strategy. This is how you gather evidence to trust your marketing. You will know based on this, what are the platforms, the visibility that you need to double down on? What's the visibility you need to double down on? And what are the nurture strategies that you need to double down on? And I can give you an example of what this looked like in someone in Reclamation. Someone in Reclamation is a somatic coach. She's wonderful. I worked with her. She's incredible. And when we went through this process, we realized that once people had space held by her, just held space, right? She wasn't even actively coaching them, but she's a somatic coach, that they wanted to work with her, because somatic work is hard to describe if you haven't experienced it. But when they had this experience, they wanted to work with her. So one of the strategies she used was how can I hold space for more people without necessarily giving away free coaching? So she put out an open call for guest coaching within people's programs. Lots of folks took her up on it. She went in and talked about the importance of nervous system and somatic work within entrepreneurship so that you can take the actions you want to take. And based on that, lots of new clients came to this person, right? That's a great example of someone who is essentially displaying their gift publicly and making it more public, versus someone who has a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, I've seen you speak on stages every time, that made me want to work with you. Or, oh my gosh, I love your workshops. You're such a great teacher. If you want to do more of that, right? So you want to just double down on what's working. So that's number 1 strategy, is gathering evidence in your marketing for you to trust your marketing. And you do that by being aware of what is your awareness strength and what is your nurture strengths. Problem number 2, dismissing or undervaluing your expertise. Now, this also affects your pricing. This is where people underprice. You're dismissing or undervaluing your expertise. Now, think about in the workforce, right? We have transferable skills. You apply for a job and then you're like, oh, I haven't done this exact job before, but I've demonstrated the skill somewhere. And you do that in job interviews. The thing about that is that in your business, your expertise isn't just limited to how long you've had the title of CEO. That's what I see, is that someone is, let's say, in the first year of their business or something, and they're just discounting all of this years or potentially a lifetime of transferable skills. I also see discounting your gifts because your gifts feel too easy. In fact, one of my clients, Patty, this year, she already has landed twice as much in revenue in corporate contracts than she did last year. And she did this by May. And one of the things she said is, I realized I am discounting my gifts because they come easily to me. And that is very common for women of color as well, because we are just taught like you need to work hard. And the thing is, in business, you get to make money from your gifts. So this all contributes to either underpricing or lack of confidence in your pricing. It also affects your identity, because when you see yourself as an amateur and you're not, you carry yourself differently rather than being like, I know my shit. You know what I'm saying? Like counting all of that. And the reason that this happens, that we dismiss or undervalue our expertise, is because we're conditioned to only count expertise when it happens under a job title. Like in the workforce, like I said, they look back at years of experience and job titles, but in business, you lean in on everything you did before you started your business, what I call like past lives. Your past life is informing what you're doing now. That's like your lived experience counts, your career counts, past failures, quote unquote, counts. You lean on gifts that you don't even notice, right? But other people do. That's called unconscious competencies. We lean on unconscious competencies all the time, and we don't even give ourselves credit for it because it doesn't feel hard. So then you're walking around and you're like, I just feel like I'm not that far advanced yet. I don't have that many years of experience. You kind of like amateur identity, imposter syndrome comes up, and you start to hold years of experience against yourself without realizing you actually have a depth of expertise that maybe hasn't carried the CEO title or the coach title or the consultant title, but you've been doing it. And like I said, lived experience counts here. And what happens when you trust your expertise is you are like, bet, I know my shit. I can help my people. I'm the best people to help. I'm the best person to help them. In fact, I am bringing things to the table from when I was 10, right? That's where you're just like, all this is relevant. All of this is relevant. You really can look at, I am bringing all of this to work for my clients. And when you can give yourself that level of credit, your belief goes through the roof. That's where you can drop the investment and you have no mind drama about it, because you know how much of a shortcut you are providing your clients because you're leaning on all these things. One strategy to help you trust your expertise and trust your pricing, again, is to gather evidence. But here's how you do it. I want you to do a transferable skill audit. So look at the work that you do. And I do this through the sellable stories process in Reclamation. This is just one part of the sellable stories process. We look at what's the unmet need that you serve. And then we draw 3 circles. One circle is unmet need. It's like a Venn diagram, right? The other is lived experience that you put to work to solve that need. And the other circle is skills that you put to work to solve that need. This is my sellable stories process in a very high level nutshell. But what is all the lived experience that you are putting to work to solve the problem for your client? And what are all the skills that you now have that help you to support your client? So this could be things like, oh, I know what it's like to be a woman of color in a leadership position and not feel supported. Oh, I know what it's like to have to be hypervigilant and look after everyone. Therefore, I created a system for my clients where they become more self-aware of when they're doing that. Whatever that is, I want you to literally create, what are all the transferable skills that you are bringing in? Count lived experience and count actual skill sets. Oh, I'm really resilient, or I'm actually just really good at organizing complicated thoughts and making them simple. Like all those things are skills. And it's not like you need to put all this in your marketing. It's more so for you to look and say, dang, I am on a gold mine. I am a gold mine for my clients. That's what I want you to know and believe. Because when you were there, like I said, you're not going to have as much doubt in why you're doing what you're doing, why you're pricing. It really helps your identity as well, because when you can see yourself and be like, damn, I'm $1 million CEO already, right? Like I think about that and I'm like, I'm $1 million coach. Well, now I actually have sold almost 1 million, but I had to tell myself this from before. And this showed up for me at the beginning because I remember as a baby coach, like my very first year, I was really leaning heavily on 2 things. One, my experience as a daughter of immigrants, eldest daughter. So like on the mindset side, I really was like, hey, here's me, here's my experiences, here's what I've been through, here's how I've worked through it, here's how I'm going to help you work through your own mindset challenges as a daughter of immigrants in business. I was giving myself credit for my entire life. Then I was also leaning into my marketing and I was like, hey, I'm a marketer. Here's how I help you with your marketing and your business, right? So I was a baby coach technically, but I was calling on past lives and talking about how those things get to be used by my clients. Does that make sense? So that being said, problem number 3 that I see where self-trust affects your demand and your strategy is you water down your thought leadership. You doubt your thought leadership. This usually happens unconsciously because people aren't always aware what their thought leadership is. So in a nutshell, your expertise is what your thought leadership is, your spin and your unique lens on it that only you have. The way that doubt in thought leadership shows up is comparison, because you're like, oh, this person is doing this, and you compare, oh, this person knows more than me or whatever. And it's like, literally it's apples and oranges. Like when you know your thought leadership, you're like, literally there's nobody exactly in my lane. So comparison, or you make yourself wrong because nobody is doing what you're doing. No one's saying what you're saying. And you just start watering down your voice. You're like, can I say this? Does this make sense? No one's saying this. So thought leaders always feel like they're a little bit on their own somehow, because you're just like, I don't know if this makes sense. And being a thought leader requires self-trust, because nurturing thought leadership means literally saying what others aren't saying. It means doing what others aren't doing. So of course you're going to be like, wait, does this make sense? Because naturally we look around and we're like, wait a minute, if I'm the only person walking in this direction and no one's walking in this direction, am I going the wrong way? Of course you're going to think that, right? And even if you have similarities to others in your field, I want you to know that it's never quite with your lens, right? So having to own those differences is what activates self-doubt. So literally being a thought leader is going to activate self-doubt, especially if you have been conditioned not to stand out, or if you have been conditioned that being different means being wrong. You don't want to stand on your own. The other part about thought leadership is you're doubling down on sharing your story and your opinions, which means trusting that your story matters and trusting that your opinions are exactly what people need to hear. What happens when you trust your thought leadership is you truly believe and operate like you are completely in a lane of your own. You start to see that you have your own arena. You're not screaming louder in the same arena with everybody else. You no longer see anyone as direct competition. You just see the differences, and it really allows you to have the identity of there's absolutely nobody like me. And that just changes the way that you show up. It also means that when you're writing things, you actually can be even more specific and it comes out of you more easily, because you're not, even if you're scrolling and you're comparing or whatever, you're like, no, it doesn't matter what the topic is. It could be the same topic that people with 5 other people who have my same technically job title or whatever in business, it's not going to sound like you. You have your unique spin. It basically is like adding flavor to everything, that it's like branding it for your ideas, branding it for your knowledge, branding it for your spin. It's not going to sound like anybody else. Your posts, your emails are going to sound like nobody else. And that means what happens when you are strong in your thought leadership is your customers, I've seen it countless times. I've experienced it myself, all the things. People will choose you before they're ready to actually make an investment. They'll just stop shopping in their mind. When you are very strong in your thought leadership, your future clients are like, that's my person. I'm going to work with them. I can't wait to work with you. Sometimes they'll tell you, but most of the time they won't. So people will decide and choose you long before they're actually ready to make the investment, because your thought leadership is so strong, they're not even shopping around. You really want to be in that place. That is so strong, because that means that the hardest part, which is choosing you and deciding that you're their person or you're their agency or you're their expert, means that you no longer need to market to convince people that you're the one for them, that you can solve their problem. At this point, you're just like, hey, I'm here. This is what's going to happen when we work together. Like, you have essentially a ready-made, plugged in, warm audience that's already made their decision about working with you. It's just a matter of timing. It's unlike anything else. So that's what happens when you can trust your thought leadership. So again, I'm going to give you one strategy to help you trust your thought leadership. And again, it is gathering evidence, but I'm going to tell you how to gather evidence specifically for your thought leadership. These are some questions that are one small part of a training that is inside of Reclamation that helps you get clear on your thought leadership. But more specifically, we help to match your thought leadership to an unmet need in the market. Because it isn't enough to just be like, hey, I strongly believe this. That's great. But what helps create demand is knowing and having evidence for getting clear on what is the unmet need in the market and what is your thought leadership that matches that unmet need in the market. Matching it to an unmet need ensures that there's demand there already, because if it's unmet, literally like it's unmet or it's underserved. But the very first step in that process, so I'm just going to share the very beginning step of that process. That's in Reclamation Mastermind, just to get you started, right? To get you clear on the evidence that you already have on what is your thought leadership. So write these down. You can pause this episode and just write down these questions, journal on them, and then see what comes up. So number one question. What have people quoted you on that is unconventional? So people will quote you. They're like, I love when you said this. I love when you talked about that. Oh, you said this. Oh my gosh, I've never heard anybody say that. So what have people quoted you on that is unconventional? Number two, if you've already been asked to speak or be on a podcast, what was the topic? If they suggested it to you, that's generally a very good indicator. That's your thought leadership. Number three, what's something you've been making yourself wrong for because you haven't heard anyone or very many people talk about it? That might actually be exactly what your community needs to hear. So if you've been making yourself wrong for talking about something or focusing on something and you're like, gosh, but nobody else is really doing this, you know that this is important to your people and people need to know this. That could be your thought leadership as well. Why the process of collecting evidence to build self-trust works is because that literally builds up your confidence because you know why you're doing what you're doing. It allows you to double down on what's working. It allows you to create a system that is unlike anybody else. So all of your systems, you're like, I know exactly why I'm doing it. It's almost like rapid fire. When your self-doubt starts to talk, your self-doubt generally asks you questions, or your self-doubt will criticize. So when it starts saying, but why are you doing this? But what if it's not working? You'll have answers. That's why it builds self-trust, because you're going to have answers. You'll be like, no, we're doing it because of this. This is the reason, right? When you have answers, you can answer back to your own self-doubt. It also allows you to work with your natural strengths rather than against them. To recap, we talked about the 3 problems that are created by self-doubt in business that I see most frequently. Number 1, you overthink your marketing or you stop doing what was working because you're trying to follow someone else's framework. Problem number 2 is dismissing or undervaluing your expertise, which affects your pricing. Problem number 3 is you dismiss or you water down your thought leadership. So all of this is essentially trust in your marketing, trust in your expertise, and trust in your thought leadership. So with that being said, if you found this episode helpful and you know that this is you and you're here, I want you to register for my July 17th workshop. It is called 3 Ways to Double Your Demand Using Self-Trust as a Strategy, where we are going to go further into each of the 3 strategies that we discussed on today's episode. You can register for that by going to the link in my bio on Instagram. It is called Register for the 6-Figure Self-Trust Series, but the workshop is part of that. And it's a series because you also get access to my Telegram channel by registering for that. But there's more information. So you can go to Instagram, Mariella.Delamora. Link in my bio. It's the first link. You also can go to my website, MariellaDelamora.com. There is a floating banner. You'll be able to click on it. It's going to take you to a page, talk more information about it. There's a July 17th workshop again, and there's going to be an invitation to join my Telegram channel, where I'm just dropping coaching, thoughts, riffing on this topic right now. In the future, I'll probably talk about other things, but I really love the idea of having Telegram where I can just show up and coach and share. Right now, we have an option for you responding to things that I've posted. So I'm able to go in and pick responses or questions and just choose them to respond to. So I'm very excited for that. But yes, register for the July 17th workshop, 3 Ways to Double Your Demand Using Self-Trust as a Strategy. And then I want you to know I am going to be reopening the doors to Reclamation for a few days. So just from July 17th, the day of the workshop, through Sunday, July 21st, I'm opening up applications again for Reclamation Mastermind. I'm doing this because I found in the last launch, there was a big common theme around this. And it doesn't surprise me because a lot of my current members of the mastermind also had those same thoughts. And after seeing how phenomenal their results were in the first few months, I'm like, oh, this is actually what people need to hear more about. I want them to know what is possible. I want them to know that it doesn't need to take forever necessarily to see results, especially if you've had an offer that you've delivered multiple times. And just the power of doing all of this in community as well means that everything is just magnified. Your identity accelerates faster. You also, in being in reclamation, you're going to actually see people who have very wildly different strategies. That's going to change your brain because you're not just being in a group where everyone's doing workshops or webinars. People are marketing in completely different ways. There's someone in there who already landed a multiple six-figure contract this year who doesn't even use social media to get new leads. It's just social media is just part of like how people vet her, but she doesn't post on there. So like when you're in a room where people are marketing differently and they are doing these big things, you're really like, whoa, I see such a different future for myself and a reality for myself in my business because I'm in a room where people are thinking differently and they see themselves as experts. And when they struggle to see themselves as an expert, there's someone else in the room who will reflect that back to them. I've had people in reclamation say, I've never dreamed this big. I've never been in a room where people dreamt this big, where people were showing up and marketing and serving in such different ways. So that in itself, this room is going to change your life. If you missed the opportunity to apply the first round, we're going to open the doors July 17th through July 21st. And I'm going to be offering an extended payment plan. Get on my email list. I will talk to you more about that to make it easier for you. Because I know if we want to stretch out our investments, absolutely. That's something that I'm happy to do this time around. So that is it. I hope this was helpful. I am very excited to see you at the July 17th workshop, 3 ways to double your demand using self-trust as a strategy. We're going to build these out. I'm going to show you for every single one, for all 3 of these, I'm going to show you a before and after for what this looked like so you can see and you can see yourself, because even with one of these areas resolved, just with one area resolved, my clients created these results. So each one of them that doubled their income or hit their goal in half the time, it wasn't multiple categories, it was one. So you're going to find out which one of these is the one that's going to be the game changer for me. So I'm excited to see you there. All right. See you next week.